Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. And so heads up, we're going in the weeds. And I mean, we are really going in the weeds. We listened and we read the comments that you left in an audio that we did the other day where we talked briefly about endocannabinoids. And a lot of you wanted us to go further into it. So we're going to do that. And I was able to grab Thomas because it is Memorial Day weekend for us at the time that we are recording this. And he was very busy with folks, but he agreed to come in and talk about it because I just find it fascinating, and I've read a lot of your questions, so I hope that we get a lot of them answered. Now, the reason that we're even interested in this, Thomas, is because you are writing a white paper for everybody. Is that correct?
Yes, because the state we're in, it's now legal in all ways, medically and recreationally, and so people keep asking us questions. And when we noticed the other day at Bed Bath & Beyond that they were selling CBDs along with everything, infusing it in everything, it was about time for us to address the question.
Now, when it became legal in our state, we had done a little research into it and found it interesting and got some of the early samples. I wasn't too impressed with it and just put it aside. And I didn't get interested again until I started reading the research that you were finding. And at the same time, people were making better grades of this product. And all I can say is if you can get CBDs in your state, when you're finished with this audio, find a place and make your order. This stuff is amazing.
Well, we are very fortunate in our state because the clinics that give out CBDs and THC and sell marijuana, they have to test everything. They know exactly the percentage of everything and every substance they have, and every batch has to be tested. And so basically, you can go into one of these clinics, these pharmacies, and you can talk to the people there, and they can educate you. And so it began my education by doing that. And when I went in, I was a little bit shocked to find out that I knew nothing, and anything I thought I knew was pretty much not true. So what we're going to tell you today is just some of the things that we found. And what Betsy's saying is absolutely right. The CBDs are wonderful, but you need to get medical marijuana quality, pharmacy quality CBDs, or else they may not be activated.
But I thought that CBDs also came from hemp.
CBDs generally, they come from hemp or marijuana, sativa, or any cannabis, sativa or indicas, and any hemp. But marijuana, sativa and indicas, just when I say marijuana or cannabis, generally I'm going to be talking about the marijuana, and if I'm talking about hemp, I'm going to refer to hemp.
Okay.
So hemp has some of the strongest CBDs in them. But now remember, between those two plants, which are really pretty much the same, generally often clumped under one name, cannabis, though you have to be careful that isn't true. One is very psychoactive and has THC, and the other one does not. Both of them have CBDs and a variety of other substances very similar to CBDs, but only marijuana has, THVs and THVAs and all these things.
Well, without some nice graphics, we're going to get lost in those letters. So I'd rather not talk about that. I want to talk about, we're in our 60s and we are in good health. And when I started taking these higher quality endocannabinoids, one of the things I noticed immediately was an ease of movement. I hadn't realized that over time I had become stiffer than maybe I was when I was younger. And I'm wondering, are we going to find out that this is actually something that's going to help us rejuvenate ourselves?
Oh, absolutely. Anytime that they find a new discovery now, they always attribute it to an enzyme, which it is. Because there are many, many enzymes. Well, CBDs and the variety of CBDs, CBNs and THVs and THVAs and all the different, so many of them that they're discovering new ones all the time. But when you're talking about CBDs, it's CBD1, CBD2, but they have found that there's a CBD3 and a CBD4 and probably a CBD5. So CBDs themselves do not get you high. You could take them all day long and you're not going to catch a psychoactive buzz from it, as it were. But this other stuff they make is so strong, you have to be very careful. And one of our readers wrote in and said they were healed by Rick Simpson Oil.
Yes.
Rick Simpson Oil is principally made from marijuana, and THC is a healer for certain illnesses, very serious illnesses. And one thing that's for sure is that the CBDs inside of marijuana stop seizures, they stop inflammation. They have been basically, or let us say help stop. All of these are just hints. These are hints. Nobody's saying go out and get this. What we're saying is that it's popping up everywhere and there has to be a reason for it. Jimmy Carter, who was on his deathbed, somebody brought him in some CBDs with THC infused in it, and he is now up and dancing, as you know, so much so I think he broke something the other day from dancing too much. Anyway, he is as healthy as can be. People are getting up off their deathbeds by experiencing these things, but if you don't know what you're looking for, you could go right down the wrong alley. You could get tons of cheap CBDs that are legal in 50 states. All states are legal, made from hemp. And they may or may not do you very much good.
Well, that was the problem that I had when we had first tried them. I believe it was a low quality. And so I didn't feel anything, experience anything. And so I said, oh, well, that's just one of those passing new medical phases that we see, right? But it's not.
Well, maybe they meant to do that by not activating it, because you have to activate the CBDs.
What does that mean, that you have to activate them?
You have to cook it for a very long time at a very low temperature. And then it can activate the CBDs so that they can then be biodigestible. Now, a CBD, you're not really going to digest. What happens is, it's so strange, CBDs go in your body like an enzyme, and they activate a lock and key system that opens up your endocannabinol system. The endocannabinol system is, imagine something in between your lymph glands and your endocrine system, your ductless glands, like your pineal gland, your pituitary gland, your thyroid gland, your thymus. And then, like, if you look at the pancreas, it's kind of open because it produces enzymes and it kicks them out when you need them. But if you don't have the enzymes coming in from the food, then you don't make the correct combination. Same kind of thing is happening with CBDs.
And that's why if you are one of our followers and you've been working the Ascend diet for a while, you're going to find that these endocannabinoids are like taking it to the next level.
Now, strangely enough, now this is the part that's really odd. Now, I've been studying this for just a short time, even though the previous article that we put out, I had started some time ago, but really I had backed off because the field is so profound. Now I'm doing a historical study of it. And it is so profound, I hope I get into that in this talk today, because what I've discovered, and what I guess people knew, I didn't know, I kind of knew, I'd heard this, but I didn't know that scientifically they have basically demonstrated it and proven it. So, your endocannabinol system in your body, throughout your whole body, and the reason they found this out was 5 years ago, they found it in your brain, in our brains. So if you look in the brain, they looked at the skull and they said, well, wait a second, this looks like an entire lymph gland system in the brain. We didn't think the lymph gland system went into the brain because of the blood-brain barrier. And so they looked closely and they said, no, this is an entire new system. So they also did some experiments on rats and so on and so forth. But in the end, they found out that the endocannabinol system is throughout your whole body and that it needs CBDs from the outside of your body that you take in through nutrition, and it needs CBDs that it produces CBDs on the inside. And the CBDs on the inside, CB1 and CB2, CBD1 basically goes to the head. CBD2 is the rest of the body. CBD1 basically enhances your consciousness. CBD2 enhances all other aspects of your entire metabolic system, and everything that is controlled by the endocrine gland system is controlled by the endocannabinol system.
So we're looking at perhaps a better health and higher spirituality. No wonder these globalist thugs wanted to keep this not technology, but this insight suppressed.
And make the people who want to use it medically into potheads. Yeah. That is not what this is about. Matter of fact, if I'm going to recommend anything to anybody, it's going to be stay away from that and go towards the medically tested and pharmaceutically tested substances. And then if you want to get really powerful, like you have a very strong illness, a deadly illness, you can go to Rick Simpson Oil, look it up online, and there are clinics that will give you this, and it's completely legal in Canada, in certain states and in Canada. But so people go to Canada to get this treatment, and it's expensive, and it knocks you out, and for weeks you do nothing but take this substance, and it basically makes you practically comatose. But at the end of it, people walk out not having their diseases anymore. That is THC. That is not CBDs. CBDs create the balance. And in fact, strangely enough, if you were to take a hit of a marijuana joint and a CBD pill, it would stop your high. A CBD pill extracted from hemp. Strangely enough, the one counteracts the other one. Now, what do they find in CBD ones? That's called anandamide. Ananda in Indian, in Hindu, in the ancient Indian culture, meant joy. And mide, usually they tack that on to most enzymes or substances that do this for you. So it creates joy in your brain. According to the ancient Indian text I'm looking at, and Chinese texts, and no matter how far back you go, Scythian, Dacian...
Go all the way back to the Scythians on this.
I'm going to in a minute, but they all talk about that it relieves stress and anxiety, and it's the doorway to heaven, and it's this sacred substance. They have all kinds of names for it. Amrita, Soma, Bang, Banja, Ganja, Usana, Sana, Cannabis, hemp, you name it. They got 1,000 names for it. So far, every culture I've looked into has it. They all have different names. Homa from the Persian, Soma from the Hindu, ancient Amrita from the Vedas. It's just amazing. And the very first thing that happens in the ancient Indian Hindu pantheon creation myths is Shiva takes out a mixing bowl and takes marijuana bud leaves, puts it in the bowl, puts some water in it, churns it around, and creates Amrita, the very substance that is what they call the heavenly dew. It's the substance that creates enlightenment. You drink this, you get enlightened. Well, that's what he creates, the first deed. Now, technically, he's using a mountain to grind it with, and he's using, so it's Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu working together, but they're basically making what the Indians all drink. Even the fakirs, the monks, the holy men, they're called fakirs, they drink banga or bang juice all the time. As a matter of fact, I just found this out, and I've confirmed it now. Most homes in India that believe in the Vedas have marijuana plants growing in the house or in the backyard, because in case a wandering mendicant monk comes by and spends the night, they don't just give them rice. They give them buds of the marijuana plant to grind up in their rice. So they take the bud of the marijuana called banga, and they grind it with ghee, with milk, with flour, anything. They mix it with everything. They eat it all the time.
Well, before you went down this path, I interrupted you, and you were talking about this being another system in your body, somewhere between the lymph and the endocrine system.
Yes, and they didn't know that it existed. And now they do. And they found that it creates homeostasis. Without this system in your body, your temperature couldn't be regulated. Your biorhythms couldn't be regulated. Basically, everything that you've ever been told that the endocrine system does, like the pineal gland. The pineal gland is all timing, all done by light, and light that comes through your eyes that goes to the pineal gland. Well, guess what? All around the pineal gland are endocannabinol glands, which tell the pineal gland when to excrete the melatonin that's inside this ductless gland, which is a master control hormone that basically controls everything in your body. Okay, and then you got the pituitary, which controls all of the salts in your blood, and the pineal gland controls basically your entire nervous system, and the thyroid system controls your metabolic system, and the thymus system controls your circulatory system, and the pancreas controls your digestive system. Each of these systems we thought were the highest there was, and everybody harps on the pineal gland. Well, guess what? There's a higher system than that called the endocannabinol system. All animals have it, especially higher order animals. It's most developed in mankind, and the part that is in the brain in mankind is the most developed of all animals, which indicates to you what is really going on there. But some time ago, Dr. Tyler and myself sat down and we discussed what would happen if you took enough enzymes that your macrophages and your white blood cells and your T cells were so activated and cleaned your body so good. So whether your problem is stress, if it's stress, CBD1, THC would be helpful to you. But if it's stress that is continuous, like you have it all the time, you need your CBDs from hemp to calm you down, to create homeostasis, to stop your blood from boiling, to stop infections, to stop illnesses and viruses and bacteria getting carried away. And that's what most Americans have a problem with. And so I think I know where you were going right there, and that is where you often go. There's no enzymes in our diet because we cooked them all out. Well,
Yes.
Guess what? Marijuana in India, they do smoke it, and the monks smoke it especially, and they smoke ganja, and they smoke hash, and many forms of hash, and they add opium and blah, blah, blah. But generally, the ancients in India, and we're going to talk about the really ancients, they didn't cook it. They were basically having an enzyme fest with the CBDs and the THCs that are in these buds of marijuana. And so they were basically turning their body onto what you would call CBD therapy. Now, on the other hand, they better drink a little soma afterwards, and I say soma, and most of the experts say soma, is the white milky sap of the hemp stalk. Remember, a hemp plant, a marijuana, they're plants. They're not trees. And this is what threw everybody off for all this time, that soma is from a plant. Same thing with the Persian homa. It's from a plant. And they debate, what is it? What is it? What is it? There's no debate. The debate is clear if you do your research, and just the light research I've done so far. I'm going to demonstrate that to you in just a second. I can give you the exact quotes and places that this stuff arises. But the point is, in ancient India, there was a thing called the tree of life, and that's what they thought soma was extracted from. Well, they didn't do their homework, because very clearly it says in India, directly from the Vedas, the 5 sacred plants of India are considered the tree of life and consist of the following: Ashvatha, which basically, when you look that up, you'll find that's the sacred fig tree, the Bodhi tree of enlightenment, okay? Now, that's the tree that Buddha received his enlightenment underneath. And so that's the reason in this particular text they put it first, okay? In a minute, I'm going to make a correction here. And then the Darpa plant, which is a sacred grass, which can be fermented and turned into a entheogen, a religious substance that creates alternative consciousness. You know, we need to alter our consciousness each day according to Maslow's chart of self-actualization. And in the ancients, they for sure did that, especially if you were a monk. And then the third one was the king of plants is Soma. Now, what does it say? King of plants. Okay, but at first it says what? And this is the confusion. The tree of life consists of 5 things. One of them is a tree. The next one is a grass. The next one is a plant. The next one is cannabis. And the next one is rice. They put the very thing that the entire culture lived on, rice, as the 5th in priority. So, enlightenment, the Bodhi tree, the fig tree comes first. Sacred grass, they all drink this. There's many names for this grass. I'm not going to go into that, but this grass is, as soon as you make a tea of it and you ferment it, it basically, they mix it with other things, and it creates a tremendous high. And then the king of plants is Soma, the juice of a plant, they call it. Well, the king of plants. The Soma, in other texts from the Vedas, say it was the first plant and all plants derive from it. It is the plant of the gods. And that is cannabis, okay? So, cannabis is the next one listed. Well, then what is Soma? It's hemp. Hemp and cannabis, they list them differently. And in a minute, I'm going to show you why that happened in China that way. But the point is that they're 2 different things. The king of plants is Soma, the hemp plant. next comes cannabis. Why? They're two different things. CBD's one, and THC gets you high as a kite. CBD 2, you could take the whole bottle. You won't even notice it, okay? But what it does is if you have a fever, it's going to create homeostasis. If you're having a seizure, it's going to create homeostasis. It's going to bring you back to the middle, bring you back to the healthy place. And then they list cannabis and then rice. Now, the Chinese list the 5 sacred grains in China are rice, the one you eat, soybean, you eat it, millet, you eat it, barley, you eat it and you ferment it, and hemp fiber, you don't eat it. So why are they saying that hemp fiber is a sacred grain? Okay, it was a grain for horses, just like soy. They didn't eat soy, actually. They were for horses. So the Chinese don't even mention cannabis. They mention hemp. Now, why is that? Hemp is the first cultivated plant in history. But along with it was cannabis. Now, they ignore cannabis because that was the secret teachings of how to use it to go back to the divine. They were used only by the religious people, monks, who had the secret plan of how to make it, the secret recipe, and then how to use it, which is even more important. And then what do you do when you go into the spiritual world and come back? If you can't do something with that, then it's a waste of your time, and you're just basically banging your head against the wall. Because why? We know that serotonin does something similar. We know that dopamines do similar things. You can take all kinds of drugs that make your brain do these things, but you can't take drugs that cause your endocannabinol system to say, oh, thank you, you've just sent the lock to my key, and you've just catalyzed an entire system that controls your health.
Kind of awakens you, tells your system to wake up again, not only in a health manner, but also in your spiritual consciousness.
And this is the shocking part to me, because thinking that, being a historian, having a degree in history, as it were, and
actually being a walking encyclopedia.
and knowing some of these things, I'm just looking back and just saying, okay, I had a hint of this, and here's the hint. And this is more than a hint. I'm using legends. Now, when you use legends and you use mythology and you use historical references that related to beliefs, especially animistic beliefs, then you're on some pretty unsure ice. You're on unsure ground. You can't really make historical statements. But now, fortunately, because we can do all of these DNA studies, we can do study of the mitochondrial DNA and find out what everyone ate all the way back to the beginning of mitochondrial DNA. We all know that we came now, literally, just in the last few months, they found it's not 3 Eves in Africa. It is 1 Eve in Africa.
Okay, now we're getting out in the weeds. Let's get back to the cannabis.
Okay, so in northern Siberia, when it used to not be so cold up there, the ancient Aryans lived, and they came from Atlantis. Oh, did I say that? Sorry. I'm talking legends now, okay? It came from a place no one knows really where, but there was a city in Central Asia called the city of Manu. That much we do know. So the city of Manu was in contact with these Aryans. And that's the distinction. The Aryans worshipped cannabis. And they came into India 4000 BC. Actually, they now know through the... Okay, that's
Thomas, wait a minute. Wait just a second. Folks, as much as you've listened to us now, you do realize that history, the way you studied it in school, is not really the way history happened. And there are cultures that you may not be aware of and historical events that you may not be aware of. And I want you to say something about the white people in China. Some people don't know that the history teachers were not telling you real history because they didn't know it.
The Chinese are Mongolian. They're Turanian. Okay? But in the Tarim Basin, in the northwestern part of Zhengzheng in China, in Tianshan Mountains, in the Taklamakan Desert, and then on up into the Gobi Desert, what we would call Mongolia, the Aryans lived, and that's who I'm describing. And they started off as Siberian shamans, and they're still there today, and they're still doing this today. So that's the reason I can speak rather definitively by looking at the legends These legends are still oral traditions going on today in these Siberian. If I get into this, you're not going to know any of the names I'm mentioning.
No, but the thing is that it's important to listen to legends because they may be telling us the actual truth of our history. So that's why we study legends.
These shamans believed that the horse god brought marijuana, cannabis, the kind that gets you high, down to earth, kind of like Prometheus brought fire in their version, and they use this substance to this very day, and they make still the soma. And why? Because they move around. They're horse people. And so the most ancient of all people are horse people. And the horse people that we know out of ancient Siberia are still there today, but they migrated. And as they migrated, they always took with them the hemp and the cannabis, the marijuana. And they grew them side by side for two different purposes. One, the hemp, they fed the stalks to their horses. And then their horses got the CBDs. They got the soma. And so did they. They extracted the soma first, and they squeezed the oil out of the seeds. They kept some seeds, and they fed the leaves and the stalks that they weren't using to their horses. And then from the cannabis, they used that to make all kinds of oil and butters and foods, and they infused it in their foods. And then they used the fiber to make ropes in their clothes. Basically, everything they needed was in those two plants, And so the horse people they worship their horses, and they said they came from the stars, along with cannabis. And so literally they have horse-headed gods. And to this very day, they're the best horse riders, and they're the Mongolian. Out of them came what we know as the Mongolian hordes, the Tartars, Attila the Hun and Genghis Khan, and these horse people who had compound bows and were able to, drive their arrows straight through their non-metallic shields.
Right, and back to the CBDs.
And they every time they got a chance, they made a sauna every night, and they threw marijuana seeds onto the fire, and they would explode and go in through their skin, and through transdermally they would receive their visions of and their strength. And before every battle, they'd drink banga. They'd drink marijuana mixed with water and other things, but sometimes just water so the enzymes don't die. And it made them brave and courageous, and their greatest warriors drank like Shiva, and they were not afraid of death, and they went out, boom, boom, boom. So, and they were basically unstoppable now, weren't they? We don't know the name of that culture, so I can't tell you the name of that culture, but we have some of the remnants of that Aryan culture, and they have on Scottish Celts in their 2000 BC, and they're from the Taklamakan Desert and the Turin Basin. All these caves, with Rudolf Steiner and Helena Petrovna Blavatsky both pointed out that in these caves are the wisdom of the Aryans, and they're still sitting there, and we have discovered some of those things, and the Chinese don't want those things looked at.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Why would they not want to recognize that heritage?
Well, when you talk about ancient things, almost everyone's going to say, yeah, it goes back to the Chinese. Nope, wrong. It goes back to the Aryans. And some of the things go back to the Chinese, and the Aryan infusion of the Turanian groups that went through China were influenced by Manu, and Manu was an Aryan culture. And Manu in Lop Nor, what is now a dead lake at the eastern end of the Turin Basin, Lop Nor Lake, has now been put underwater by Halliburton after they found
Dick Cheney, folks. It always comes back to the cabal.
Yeah, they found this city, and they said, oh my gosh, it's Aryan. You know what the Chinese always do to every Aryan archaeological find they can get a hold of? They bury it underwater. So the Yangtze River, and the biggest dam ever built, put underwater thousands of archaeological digs, which are the oldest things that we know of in the Chinese world, but they are all infused by Aryan culture. And so the horse culture, it didn't make it big in China, now did it? not until much later. So the horse culture came down out of this area of Siberia when it was and went through the Gobi Desert, where there was a very amazing place I told you about the other day, the White Island. And then it went down further, and then that whole area was all underwater. It's now a desert. It's a high desert. And the greatest number of whale bones, fossilized whale bones, showing all the missing links of the whales that were at one point a sea animal and then became a land animal and then went back to the sea.
Is that because they were on CBD oil? I mean, really, when are we going to get back to the CBDs?
Well, okay, I have to explain this because this is so complicated.
Okay.
Now, who was it that led that culture? There was before the Buddha, thousands of years before the Buddha, 18,000 years before Gautama Buddha, Siddhartha Buddha, was another Buddha, and there were other Buddhas before that. But that Buddha's name was Tampa Shinrab Miwoche, and we'll just call him Shinrab, or Tampa means teacher, and Shinrab is his name, and Miwoche means the great one. So Shinrab was the teacher, and he was clairvoyant, so he could talk to the plants and talk to the animals, and that's where they got all this wisdom from. Where do you think they got it? They just tested plants, and the ones that didn't kill them, they used.
No, the plants told them.
The plants talked to them in those days, 18,000 BC, okay?
Yeah.
So he was the horse breeder, and he worked with China, and there's interactions that he has in the Bonpo culture, Bonpo, you're a Bonpo if you believe in Bon, and Bon believes in the teachings of Shinrab. And Shinrab is just one of the Buddhas in that line. And that lineage comes down through the Tibetan Buddhists and is now considered the fifth school of Tibetan Buddhism. And I've studied the other four quite thoroughly, and I'm studying Bonpo. You just can't get things in English, but the Bonpo is the original. And now the Dalai Lama, my good friend, acknowledges them. And I had a lot to talks with him about the Bonpo, because Bonpo and animism, it shows us the original roots, and we should not divorce ourselves from being connected to the elemental world. So, the point is that in Tibetan Buddhism, Bonpo created Dzogchen, which is the quickest form to enlightenment, and the Ningbapa path, or what's called the Black Hats. Anyway, Shinrab migrated from Siberia, leaving some people there, but he ended up in the Hunza Valley. Yes, the valley where people live to be over 100 years
like
old.
Like Hunza water?
Yeah. And the Gilgit Valley right next to it, and those valleys north of Pakistan. And if you look, all of the goddess cultures all come from there. They come from the Pakistani valleys and the upper mountains, and especially these places that are some of the most beautiful places in the world, where people live the longest and used to have a happy life until they installed Coca-Cola dispensers. And they opened a hotel called Shambhala right in Hunza Valley. Isn't that lovely? And so they studied the water there to find out, and it's actually Shungite. Well, Shungite is in Russia. The original Shungite and the greatest amount of Shungite is in Russia. And so why did these people migrate? They were following the seasons with their horses, planting an annual, the hemp plant and the cannabis plant, and using it for everything they needed. It's everything they needed was taken from those two plants. Okay? And that's the reason the Scythians, this group later was called the Scythians. Now, when did they become the Scythians? Well, no one can say. They're going to tell you that, 2000 to 4000 BC, and by the time they migrated all the way into the Near East, basically the Scythians ended up on the Black Sea and Caucasus, when they refer to the Aegeans and the Caucasus, and they refer to King Aegeus, those are Scythians. And what did they have? They were the ones who knew how to work gold. And so when you say Scythians, in any magazine, in any history book, in any museum, they're going to show you pictures of horses in gold, because the Scythians taught the Greeks, the Dacians, gold work. They taught them everything. And so Jason and the Argonauts, where did they go first? To King Aegeus. And who was it? It was his daughter, who Jason married. What's her name? I can't think of her name. And then later, she was the demise of Hercules.
Can we kind of go back to where...
The point is, these are Scythians.
Okay, I know.
And now, if you want to get really deep, and you go to the richest people in the world, they're going to tell you that they know the trans-Himalayan masters who live for as long as they want. Really, there are people like this, and they're the ancient Scythians, and they live west of the Ural Mountains, and they live basically secretively east of the Black Sea. And to this very day, go ahead, try to find out about these people. It's still very obscure. Now, why did they obscure this? Because they had the secret of Soma. They had the secret of Enlightenment. They had the plant. And they taught it to who? The Greeks, the Dacians. They taught it to the ancient Persians. They taught it to the Indians, the ancient Hindus. So as they migrated, you can literally follow the path of horses and wheeled chariots, compound bows later, and the use of cannabis and hemp. And as you do, and that's what I always do, people don't know that the secret to doing real good historical research is to either do it through DNA or do it through plants and botany. And so I'm doing this through botany. And it's very easy because there's a tremendous amount done on botany and the science doesn't lie. So now what we need to do is just ask a few questions and do some testing of these people in ancient Siberia, and we will find that it's true what I'm telling you. But the point is this is historical, it's in legends, and all I'm doing is retelling a story that has been told since 18,000 BC. So, and it's my favorite story because nobody knows about it, and literally I can't find two people on the earth to have a conversation with me about this, but it doesn't really matter. Because it's in books, and every day new elements of the Bompo culture are being translated into English, and I get them and I'm looking at them and I'm amazed because it's a goddess culture. It's a culture based upon cannabis. It's a culture based upon horse worship, and the horses take you to the sky, back to the stars from where they came. And so, but their horses, yes, hang on, get ready, here we go. Their horses initially had a horn on its forehead. And when you look at this group called the UYGER, I can't pronounce any of these names. I've never heard anybody pronounce them, so I'm sure I'd pronounce them all wrong.
How do you say that? UYERG?
There's many spellings.
Okay.
UIGER, UYIEGER with an H in there. You name it. You can't.
Now, I do realize you could take the horn image and take it over to your other favorite animal, the narwhal.
I'm going there.
Oh, no.
Yes.
But we remember the point of this was to tell people about the CBDs.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay.
But this is the Finnish culture. They call it Indo-Aryan. They call it Urgurk. So anytime you want to study this, you have to study Urgurk. Okay? Well, Urgurk, there's nothing written. Good luck. You have to go to their songs and their rituals. And then you can get their stories and you go, whoa! They say the ultimate horse that came from the sky was a unicorn. Now, the unicorn horn was used as a powder to heal everything on the earth. And this is all the way up to the Middle Ages. And where does the unicorn whale live? Yes, it lives right off this very peninsula I'm speaking of in Siberia. Yes. And where do we find these remnants? The only remnants is in the Gobi Desert. And what did Halliburton also find in the Gobi Desert? 200 small pyramids that have in them, according to some people who have said this, the library of the White Island. And if that's the case, then these libraries are still sitting there, 200 of them. And someday when we'll probably have to learn to translate it. We haven't learned hieroglyphic well enough to translate those. So we still have, tens of thousands of hieroglyphics and Sumerian rolls, Babylonian. We have all this stuff. Tampashin Rabmiwoche has a tantra called the Flowering Light Tantra, where he literally is speaking of smoking marijuana with his people. And his daughters are these sacred daughters who become the teachers. He's like this animistic guy out there in nature, wrestling with the elementals and taming the horses and breeding the horses and going to get back the horses when people try to steal them because he don't want anybody else to have these horses. And they keep stealing them, and he keeps going and getting them back. And they try to steal his daughters, and then he has to go. And that's why the areas are called Mustang, North Mustang, South Mustang, Olmec, the horse names, right? And so he's this guy, but his daughters are the ones who really run the show. And they are the priestesses. And they became what literally from 18,000 BC right up to the time of Buddha was a matriarchal culture that still exists to this very day. So when you go to the very deepest Tibetan wisdom, it's held by all female monks. And I know this because I've studied this deeply. I'm not speaking off the top of my head. And the highest being in all of Tibetan Buddhism is Vajrayogini, who is the consort of all 10,000 Buddhas. No one is higher than Vajrayogini, a female deity. So this whole female Horus cannabis thing comes all the way down. It goes down to China, then it goes to India, then it goes to Persia, then it goes to these places I'm talking about in the Black Sea and leaves a culture there, but then it goes to the north of Greece and connects to the Dacian culture, which then, of course, creates the Roman culture and then the European culture. And you can follow marijuana and cannabis use, and it was then outlawed because they knew that it was powerful. And who got control of it? The male monks. And when the male monks of all the religions got control of it, the recipe for soma got lost. The recipe for enlightenment got lost. The very plant's name got lost, and then they debate what is usana, and they debate it all day long, and no one will come up with an answer. It's very simple what it is. Just look and taste and get the good medically derived substances from the white, creamy sap of the hemp stalk, and you have the soma. It's very clear. And if you don't believe this, then what you do is you get the distillate of CBD without any THC in it, and it has all the CBDs in it, and that's what you want. You want this entourage effect, it's called. You want the effect of the whole plant. You don't want the effect of one part of the plant.
And you don't want any of this synthetic stuff they're pushing out.
Oh, that's evil.
Really, you want it organic, natural, because the complexity of the plant is so much more than what is a man-made thing.
And even the aroma.
Yeah.
Has everything to do with it and the taste. And that's why Shiva and all those monks and the Indian people, anywhere you go, you'll see a booth for banga. Everybody drinks it. Why? Because it's an enzyme, CBD, rich drink that basically relaxes you, enlightens you, and heals you and creates homeostasis in your body. Now, it's not going to make you high. It will make you high. And so you have to realize that if you're going to take that, I don't recommend that. I recommend taking CBD distillates. Now, all the CBD pills, if you look, it's going to tell you how many of the different CBDs are in it. You want the one with the greatest number, and then you want the one with the highest dosage, and you take it and you don't feel a thing. But after a while, all of a sudden you go, hey, wait, my joints don't hurt. And what about that pain that's been in my neck for 10 years? Where'd it go?
Right. and I feel like it brings a buoyancy, like a levity. I feel like lately I'm like, why all the gravity? Why can't we start arising and ascending into levity?
And by the way, we tried all the CBDs on the market, the legal CBDs. I tried them all. They were all awful. And then I go to a friend. He says they're not activated. I took them all to a clinic. To a pharmacy where they test these things, and none of them are activated. And I said, well, how do I get that? He goes, I'm trying to make it, but it's so darn hard and nobody can make it. So a guy one day gives me one from a clinic from somewhere. I don't even know if it was from the state. And he just gives this to me. He says, oh, this is CBD. He did not tell me that it was a pharmaceutical, and it had all the CBDs in it. And that one worked. And I said, holy cow, you're my hero. Where do I get this? I'll climb a mountain to get this. And so then I figured this stuff out, and it became legal in this state and other states, and everybody's got it.
And if anything, if it frustrates you that you can't get this good quality stuff in your state, then start pushing your legislators to make it legal in your state. I mean, we can now grow hemp in America. So let's start reaping all the products from it.
Now, Big Pharma wants to control it as a pill, as what is their proprietary right. So what they will do is they'll take it, they'll add to it, make it proprietary, they'll denature it, they'll make a chemical of it, and then they'll put their name on it. They have already done that. There are 3 or 4 or 5 different accepted FDA pills for very specific things. One's for seizures, one's for blood pressure, one's for very, very serious illnesses that kill people. So if they do it for that, and it is, in this case, those some are synthetic and some are not, it's the big pharma is trying to buy out all of the big pharma's control. But see, big pharma already had control of hemp. You can't sell hemp oil unless it meets the requirements of the law set out by Congress that meets the hemp bill. So no matter what, if you get hemp, it's high quality, but it is not necessarily activated. Because they don't want it to be activated, because then you'd have soma, and then everybody'd be happy, and they'd wake up and they go, hey, what's going on in Washington, D.C.? This ain't right.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's the last bit to keep everybody asleep.
Yeah, that's what it is. And it's a panacea of the masses that they don't mind giving. That's why do you think they made marijuana legal so everybody gets high? That's the THC end of it. Now, there are CBDs in marijuana, and you do get the endocannabinol reaction, but you also get the CBD1 reaction, so you get a high. And guess what? If you take the CBD2,
you don't get
the
high.
hemp, it actually stops you from being high. That's what it does. They're mixed. They're a plant that belongs together. So take both together, and what do you have? Rick Simpson. And Rick Simpson has some of the strongest of the CBDs that have been crossbred from hemp and indicus and sativa into marijuana. And then so basically it's a special type. You can't just make Rick Simpson out of just any marijuana. But if you make it, they can even infuse it with another 5% of marijuana because they can take really, really strong strains of marijuana, take that THC and infuse it. So you can go to a clinic and you can get Rick Simpson oil with plus 5% THC, and that's the strongest you can get. One drop of that will knock you out. Let me warn you, do not do this at home without really medical advice. Seriously. People take this and they think they're dying because they're having ayahuasca or a peyote or acid LSD trip, and they freak out. So you got to be very, very careful with this. The best way to do it is take it, go to sleep. The very, very best way to do it is under a doctor's control, so that you have to keep increasing the Rick Simpson dosage until for some reason it so permeates your entire endocannabinol system and your anandamides are making you so happy that you can deal with it, I guess, that you are you are stoned beyond Shiva, you're stoned beyond anything ever imagined in history, and yet your CBD system, your endocannabinol system is keeping you chill, it's keeping homeostasis, while the THC is healing you. So, don't get confused in all of this. It's extraordinarily confusing. And if you have any doubts, don't. So, that's what I had to say about that. Betsy, you ask, it's a big question. I can't put my arms around it yet. I can't put my brain around it yet. I'm trying to understand it. All I can say is, people gave us great advice. They gave us their great opinions. They told us that they were healed by this or that. They asked questions. So you were right that we needed to answer this question, but we can't answer it fully. And we had to say, you got to talk to the real experts, because this is a new field of science. It's 30 years old. It was ignored for 25 years of those 30 years. And for the last 5 years, it's still been restricted by the government as a Schedule I narcotic, which is absolutely insane. Nicotine is, I forget what it is, 10,000 times more powerful per gram than marijuana or even THC, pure THC. So nicotine itself should be on the Schedule 1.
I know how you feel about nicotine, and that's another hour discussion. So I'm pulling you back from that.
But we got to answer the question. Why did they hide marijuana? Because marijuana was a threat to all industries. It was first a threat to the lumber industry because it creates better paper than lumber, and we don't have to kill the trees. It creates clothes. It creates oil. Its stock can be used to create a gasoline, very easily, and that's the one that they really hated.
This sounds like hemp.
It's hemp.
Well, you said marijuana.
It's both, but hemp itself, they went after hemp.
And the other thing is all of the comments, if you've had personal experiences, we'd love to hear from you. And so would other people in the community. Kind of use that as a blackboard to share your experiences. We're not going to give you recommendations of where to go because we can't. It's the states differ in where you can go to get products. So if you have suggestions for this community, feel free to leave your comments.
And the government will put you in jail over this stuff if you break their laws.
Yeah.
And sometimes their laws are one way one day and different another day. You literally have to be 100% current, or don't even approach this topic, because it's still the forbidden fruit. It's still the forbidden plant. It's still the forbidden way to go back to where we know we all came from, which is a transcendental experience into the divine. And so we're talking about big corporations. We're talking about the robber barons. We're talking about cabals that warred against hemp. And when hemp is allowed, hemp alone will bring the agriculture of any state back into a positive tax bracket. But when they allow marijuana, You have a tax surplus in most of the states that have allowed this, and after it got rolling, sometimes didn't mean that as a joke, but after about a year, when they really get it controlled and they make sure that everything is right, the pharmaceutical companies come in and they try to control it, or they try to put the farmers out of business. They'll only give a license to the huge farmers and not let the small farmers. Here in this state and in other states, they have designated growers, so you can literally say, I'm a very sick person and I need a grower to grow me this stuff, or I need to grow it myself, so they'll let you grow 12 plants at a time, or they'll let somebody grow it for you. But in other states, they will put you in jail still. Remember, I forget the statistic, I think it's between 35 to 40% of people in jail are there because of marijuana. That's just stupid. Okay, look, I think it should be controlled, and I think people shouldn't be driving on it, and I think people should be very, very careful with this, and absolutely under no circumstances to take a hit of Rick Simpson and then go out and think that you're going to be a normal person. No.
Okay, so if you want to know more questions, put them in the comment box. Thomas, will you hang around for about 24 or 36 hours to answer people's questions?
I would be happy to, but I can't guarantee I can answer them. I'm a newbie on this stuff, and what I'm finding out, though, Betsy, is the shock of a lifetime, because it seems as if the magic plant healer drug has been hidden from everybody for a long, long time.
But Thomas, you can't stop there. You haven't told people the real secret.
Well, you're right, Betsy. I did withhold the ultimate secret. That's because most people aren't going to understand it. So if you've already checked out, fine, because this secret is only for the initiates. Now, the ancient alchemists would go out and collect dew, specifically dew on the morning of the spring equinox, and that dew, for some reason, would turn blue, and then it would become later a powder that they'd make into the elixir of life. Well, Shiva told the monks, when Shiva brought marijuana down from the sky, not on a horse, though. I wish it would have been on a horse. Oh, by the way, the narwhals in Siberia, that's where they lived, right? So don't forget that. So they actually worshipped the narwhals. So narwhals were a horse with the crown, with the thorn. I mean, the horn on the head. But anyway, so Shiva would give these instructions. He would say, first, you must pick the marijuana at the exact right moment in the day, at the sunset. And then you must expose the marijuana leaves and buds to the rising sun 3 mornings in a row so that you would catch the morning dew. The morning dew. And then you would have to dry them. You would basically kind of enclose them so that the morning dew would kind of penetrate into the marijuana leaf. So you do that 3 mornings in a row. And then after that, you would specifically dry them in a certain way, exposing them to the sun at a certain time of the day. And then you would powderize that. And then you would simply put water on it and drink it.
Well, that sounds like Ormus.
It is like Ormus because it would have a lot of the hyperconnectivity high metals. As a matter of fact, someday that's what they're going to find out about marijuana, is my opinion. CBD1s must be the same thing as what are called the precious metals, a white gold, iridium, cesium, the very heavy metals that get into the brain that cause the connectivity of thought. And so eventually I believe they will find that those very metals that are also found in Ormus will also be found in the buds of marijuana. So that is the ultimate secret, the morning dew. And Rudolf Steiner once said that the demise of the earth would be known when the morning dew no longer falls.